Okay, welcome back from break. Did everybody enjoy Sergeant Wallace's presentation? Yes. Okay, great. We have a second speaker here. It's State Attorney Sharon Franklin. She's married with 3 grown children and a dog. She graduated from Santa Fe High School and Troy State with a degree in English. She attended and graduated law school from Berry School of Law. However, she is a die-hard Gator fan. She has been both a felony and misdemeanor prosecutor and is currently the chief of the Child Crimes Prosecution Division and has been a felony director for 3 years. She has been a guest speaker at the Domestic Violence Symposium in Tampa and Bartow and has been a presenter on sexual abuse at the FPAA seminar. Please help me welcome State Attorney Sharon Franklin.
If you can't hear me, let me know, but nobody has ever said, hey, Chris. Nobody's ever told me that I've been quiet, so I've raised 3 kids and I taught high school, so I learned how to yell really well. My name is Sharon Franklin, as you heard. It was asked to do this by Chastity, and I'm just seeing people I know out there. And I've been with the State Attorney's Office since 2000, August of 2000. I kind of had a different journey than a lot of attorneys did. This is a second career for me. Like she said, I was a high school English teacher for years. When my kids were in elementary school, and I decided to go back to school, went to Berry over in Orlando when it first started and commuted back and forth. And yes, I am a stubborn Irish woman. The school did not get accredited in time. We took the bar exam, they sealed it. If the school didn't get its accreditation within a year, then we had to go back to law school again. So being a stubborn Irish woman who also liked punishment, I guess, I opted to go back to law school for a second time. They had us redo 2 of 3 years, treated us like transfer students. After that, the school did have its accreditation. I did take the bar. Yes, I passed finally, and got to go to work. And I was working at the State Attorney's Office when all this happened. They hired me before that. I had to go back. So I thank Jerry Hill every day for that, because he could have told me, until you figure out what's going on, you're out of here. So that's kind of was my journey through law school. My youngest son, who will be 23 in June, yes, I'm old, he was starting kindergarten right after I started law school the first time, when all the ordeal was finally done and I was taking the bar exam. He was starting 9th grade, just to give you an idea of how long that process took. I did continue to teach through the beginning of it, because you just can't get rid of a whole income with 3 kids. And yes, I put my dog in because I'm a huge dog lover. We had 3 at one point. We're down to 1. And my kids are all gone, so she's my baby when I come home at night. To let you know, law school, how you get through it. First of all, you have to have your undergrad degree. I have people ask me all the time, is there a magic, course to study? Not really. I mean, if you talk to people who are law school graduates, they will tell you English is a good one, because you do a lot of writing, a lot of reading. If you don't enjoy writing and reading, I would not say to go to law school. Find something else. I hated math, and so I went to law school. After you do the political science majors, there's, if you like more technical stuff and you want to go and not be necessarily in a courtroom, you can go and you can take courses in like engineering if you want to do patent law. I would rather go back and teach high school than do that, but that's just me. If you enjoy being around people and talking to people, then you would love doing trial work. I love doing trial work. I, kind of searched what I wanted to do in life. I went through teaching, thought about being a guidance counselor at one point, and when I stumbled upon through working at the Guardian Ad Litem office, working with attorneys and stuff, I just thought that was a really cool thing to do. So my passion has always been, when I started law school, I wanted to do the kind of cases that I'm prosecuting now, which are any cases that involve children as victims. A lot of people look at you like you have 3 heads when you tell them what you prosecute. Oh my God, how do you do that? And I think, how do you not do it? I mean, you know, you hear, and I agree, the homicide prosecutors that I work with who are very good at what they do, they like to speak for those who can't speak for themselves, as they say. I kind of feel the same way. I mean, I have, you know, any kids anywhere from, and we handle cases that are not first-degree homicides. I've got one going next week that's an aggravated neglect of a child where the child died. So we do get the cases with the infants and stuff, the shaken babies, that kind of stuff. And then we get anything up to, I've got, you know, 16, I actually have one case now that's an old case, happened years ago. First time in my life I've had a child crimes case where the victim is older than I am. Woohoo! Never happens. This woman is about 3 or 4 years older than I am. And back when the crimes occurred to her, it's very interesting. They used to do like they do for first-degree murder cases now. They do a grand jury, not just citing an information. That case, the attorney who initially handled the case, he had a grand jury on this now because of when the crimes occurred, he could do that. The grand jury indicted on it, and the case is proceeding right now through trial. It's a relatively okay case. You know, you start looking back that far and how things have changed. This woman now had a baby back then. There was no DNA. So today it would be a piece of cake, you know, whether this baby ended up not surviving through childbirth, the baby's been buried for years, they're not going to exhume the body. And so it's crazy, but you know, today we would have immediately gotten DNA on that kid. We could have proven right away if it was his or not. Makes it a little trickier now because there wasn't DNA back then. And in today's world, it's just crazy. Nobody thinks about the fact that there were times when there wasn't DNA to try cases. And it wasn't that long ago. So, you know, you get that kind of stuff. But how we work in our office, we get, and I know you've heard from law enforcement, once they get a call, they investigate the case, they go on scene. We do not send attorneys on scene for child crimes. Not that we're adverse to it, but certainly if somebody called and said, you know, we need you to go, we'd come out there. And by we, I usually mean me because I have the on-call phone because guess what, that's part of being the supervisor. I get calls, and it's been really busy lately, that, you know, on the weekends. And if law enforcement has a question, or what can we do? And I certainly encourage that because I would rather them call me up front before they send me a case, and there are things that could have been done beforehand. With child crimes cases, what we do, and a lot of this prep work ahead of time, I will tell you that, no offense to any other organizations, but I know the Sheriff's Office and the Lakeland Police Department both have detectives that are primarily assigned to doing those types of cases. They get extra training in how to do those types of cases, which is very helpful to us on the prosecution end when we get a case from them. Some of the smaller agencies, just because they don't have the numbers, you know, if you're the on-call, you get anything that walks through the door. And those are a lot of the phone calls I get, which, again, I welcome because it's easier for us to do stuff up front than at the end. When you have a case involving a child, you have certain hurdles and obstacles you've got to get over. The biggest one for us on down the road is getting this child through a trial without re-victimizing them. Because, you know, you think about being 6, 7, 8 years old, and I think the youngest child I put on the stand was 5. And believe it or not, they do a great job. It's their parents who are freaking out. The teenagers are the ones that have the harder time getting on the stand. So you have to get a child or a teenager through a trial without them feeling like they're being totally re-victimized. That's difficult to do because the whole process is not child-friendly. I mean, you think about when I'm picking a jury sometimes and I have children coming in who have to talk about a sex abuse case. And one of the questions I start off with my juries is I'll sit there and I'll go, sir, do you want to share with us your latest sexual escapade event, whatever it was? I mean, come on, just, you know, we're all here for that. You heard the charges. You don't want to share with us? You sure? I mean, these are, you know, maybe 100 people that you've never met before. You sure? Okay. And then I asked them, all right, we're getting ready, as the judge told you, you've got a child under 12 years of age that's about to take the stand in this case, and they're going to tell you about child sex crimes that occurred to them. The first thing I asked them is, are you going to be able as a juror to sit and listen to them testify about what happened to them? Because some people cannot. And it's hard for them, and I'd rather know up front because I don't want them breaking down while this kid's up there, because how's that going to impact the child? The other thing I ask them is, you're going to go back as the jury room when this trial's over. And you're probably going to be in mixed company. No offense to women, but most of us attorneys do not want a jury of all women. And as a woman, I'm saying that. Women don't like to make decisions. Put a man under, somebody's going to take charge. And I don't mean to say that. I am not sexist. From my perspective, this is the case. Very few cases. You're going to be in mixed company. How are you going to feel about going back and talking about sex acts with people you just met? Think you'd be able to do that? You could do that. That's what I want to hear. You're going to get some little church grannies in there that are going, oh, my, I can't do that. You know, and they are. And I want to know that up front, too. You know them. I mean, there's some people out there who live in this little rose-colored world, and they don't even know this stuff exists. So you want to know those kind of things. And the other reason I ask them that is because any of you who have been around people know, does everybody react to a situation the same way? No. Okay. I know my middle son, and I'm not going to give you his name because he doesn't live in town, but he'd kill me if I talked about him like this. He's 25. He has, since he was a kid, had this nervous tick that when he's getting in trouble, and trust me, my 3 kids, he was very experienced at that. He would start to giggle and laugh. And it was a nervous reaction for him. He knew better because he knew, with my background, I was like, you think this is funny? Really? Come on, let's go down here and talk a little further in my room. And yes, I did spank my children. Y'all can hate me for it if you want, but I did not beat them. There's a difference in beating and spanking. No marks were ever left on my children. I learned how. No, I'm kidding. But he had that nervous tick. People do that. Think about getting on the stand. These kids are nervous, just like any witness is nervous. I had the unfortunate experience of being a witness in a case, or a victim in a case, because someone broke in my house one time, and I had to testify in court. Let me tell you, it's a whole different perspective when you're not the attorney and you're the one being asked the questions. So it is a little bit nerve-wracking. And if you go into law enforcement, get used to it, because you're going to work hard to build these cases. And occasionally we get an officer who calls and says, yeah, I didn't really know what happened in this case. I just was the first person to arrive, so do I need to really come into court to testify? Depends on the case, but chances are yes, because who's the first person that saw everything that's going on and how everybody's acting? First responder. Sorry, guys. So a lot of times we will call you guys, even though you may not be a lead detective. So you've got to think about how people will react on the stand. And some kids may giggle. How about when you've been asked about something over and over and over again, and you got to tell the same story over and over and over again? Do you have the same emotional way of telling it generally? Okay. So some kids may get up there and people may expect them to be falling apart crying, and they get up there and they're like, yeah, and then he did this, and then he hit me here, and there's a flat affect, there's no emotion. So one of the things we have to do, particularly with kids, is to kind of educate the jury as to, don't expect them to act any certain way. I've had 18 and 19-year-olds who take the stand who have been sexually abused most of their life by a parent or a step-parent, who show up to court with purple hair, piercings everywhere, and pregnant. Now, how does that portray to a jury? This is supposed to be my sympathetic victim. Well, you know what? That's my job to go in and start building a jury selection. How would you expect somebody who's been abused their whole life to try and stop that abuse? Make themselves look different? Make themselves, would they be promiscuous? Yes, because how do they learn to find love? By whoever's doing it. You can get beaten or you can give in and have sex with your dad. So they have a boyfriend at 16, and he may not be abusive, but you know what? The way they show love is that, yes, I'll have sex with you, and she ends up pregnant. So those are the things that we have to combat doing these kind of cases that you don't necessarily have to do if you've got a possession of methamphetamine. Okay, you got the drug, you got the officer that found it, you got the lab person that tested it, and that's it. A lot of people look at this and go, oh my God, there's no way I would want to do this. That's what I like about my job. You know, we deal with about 6 statutes in my line of work, in my division, you know. But 6 statutes that are like fingerprints every case that comes through. They're all different, which is the fun part of it. How can I put this puzzle together and prove that what I know happened, happened? And sometimes you have to do it without a victim. Like my case next week is a child who died who was 8 months old. Obviously he is not going to testify, unfortunately, and he couldn't have anyway if you were an infant who survived. So you have to start building your case medically. I've learned more about medicine and DNA than I thought I ever wanted to know. It's part of the job. And part of it is that I don't have to know it inside and out. I just have to know enough about it to be able to get those who are the experts on the stand to do their job and get it across to a jury. So anyway, kind of digressing. We get our cases from law enforcement. Some of the tools that we use that other areas of the law can use as well, but that we depend on a lot, there's something called a controlled phone call. Law enforcement can ask a victim, if they're able, and or a parent or a guardian or somebody else, to make a phone call to a suspect. Maybe you don't have anything else to go on. There may be no DNA. There may be no physical evidence. And this is when I welcome phone calls from people that don't do this all the time. So I'm like, okay, if you got somebody who could make a phone call to this person and see if they'll talk on the phone. And they can ask questions. And you know what? That phone call goes into evidence because it's at law enforcement's direction. It's a great tool that we love to use because it supports what our kids are saying. I've had great calls from kids that you would think, how did they do that? I mean, I had one from a 12-year-old girl one time, and it was her uncle who had been molesting her. And she just kept going, and we got kind of... The one thing you'll learn from working with people that do this a lot is we joke about things that other people go, what a sick person. But you know what? It's also a release because we have to find something in this or you'd be walking around crying all day. So this girl would sit there and it was the uncle tape, we called it, because all she kept saying was, uncle, uncle, because he kept going on and on and on. And she was trying to focus him in. The 13-year-old is focusing the adult. Unfortunately, that's a lot of what we see too. But through that tape, he kept saying, I don't know why I did what I did. But he admits to doing it. That's golden. That supports everything this kid is saying. This idiot had a great plea offer. It was prison. It was many years of prison. He went to trial. He's doing life in prison now. A lot of it is based on the fact that this kid did great in trial, and they had that phone call to back her up. Because a lot of people don't want to trust what a kid says. The other thing that we use a lot is law enforcement will bring people in to do an investigative interview with them. Offering them a polygraph or a CVSA, which is a computerized voice.
Stress analysis.
Thank you, stress analysis. That's why I have you back here. So those are, it's basically a polygraph. It does the same thing. A lot of times these guys come in and they're like, I didn't do it. I'll take a polygraph. I'll prove to you that kid's lying. Really? Okay, well come on. We just happen to have that right over here. Now it's not coming in at trial because they're not admissible. But when he shows or she shows deception in that, what do you think the officers do at that point? They go back in and say, you know, that pretty much saying it sucks to be you, but guess what? Shows to me that you weren't being truthful with us. And what do they do? Probably 85% of the time. They start going, well, and then the best thing that happens is they confess. The second best thing is they give you about 4 or 5 different stories that none of them make sense. And you can go in front of a jury and go, first he said this happened. And I'm sorry I say he because most of my defendants are he's. And then he came back and he said this happened. And then, you know, after he shows that something else happened, because I can't say he took this, he told a different story. Who's been consistent in this case? The victim. Over and over and over again, this person has told you the same story. The defendant, not so much. Now, when we get into trials and stuff, we obviously prep our victims ahead of time. Our office has a policy with children because depositions and felonies are a given. Law enforcement will be deposed if you had a major part in this. If you have questions and it's your first deposition, I urge you to call the state attorney if they do not contact you, or email, because it is important that you know what's coming. And the biggest thing I can tell you about depositions, people say all the time, so what should I do to be ready for my deposition? Read your reports and be ready. And if you got called out the night before and you haven't had a chance to get a report or to read it and review it before, when you walk into that deposition, you look at both the attorneys and you go, you know what? I had a call out last night and I wasn't able to review like I wanted to. Can I take 10, 15 minutes to do it? No attorney is going to tell you no, even the defense attorneys. They want you to be prepped for your depo. And if you don't, if you need a copy of your report, ask us. We have them. We'll get you a copy. Once we get the case in, what we do in our office, we have 4 attorneys right now that all we do are child crimes cases. And on average right now, we have probably active, it's the highest I've ever seen it, and I've been doing these cases for about 8 or 9 years now. The highest I've ever seen it. I don't know why. People say, what do you think's going on? I don't know if it's because people are more aware of this stuff now and it's getting reported more. I don't know if every pervert in the world is moving to Polk County. I don't know if people are just mad and are starting to beat the crap out of their kids. Couldn't tell you. We also handle the failure to register of the sex offenders. So once they're a sex offender and officers go out and check to see where they are, if they're where they're supposed to be, and they're not, then we get those cases too. But we bring the kids in. We have probably, I guess, active cases, about 350 active cases right now for 4 prosecutors. That's absurd with these cases. The other thing that we do that the rest of the felony division doesn't do is we do our own intake. Well, I take that back. Economics crimes does too. There is an intake division at our office who does all of the getting all the reports together, getting all the transcripts and statements together, making a decision of what crime should be charged, and they do that. Our division in economics, we do our own intake. Somebody said to me one day recently, because of the number of cases, wouldn't it be helpful for them to do yours? Absolutely not. I will suffer through all my cases. And the reason being is because we bring these kids in when we have kids old enough, and we interview them before we file them. We call it an investigative interview or an invest. And the reason that is so important to us is a lot of times, particularly kids who don't want to disclose a lot, think of more stuff between the time you've seen them as law enforcement or the child protection team has interviewed them and when we get the case, which may be 2 or 3 weeks later. More stuff comes out, they're more comfortable telling, and it starts to come out. So we may have additional charges to what you guys filed in your reports. The other reason is it is so important for these kids to have a face with what's going on. That rapport building on down the road is priceless. When I've got a 15-year-old who would rather, be anywhere than sitting in a room with me, and, we get through. I had one time come in and sit there, and it was her boyfriend, and she sat in my office, and thank God I had teenagers and taught high school. She had a baby by her boyfriend who was 36. She was 14 and was pregnant with baby 2. Now she's about to hit 15. And she loved him. He loves that man. And she may have, in her own way. But he was a little old for her. Just going to put it out there. At least legally. Mom and Dad were very happy because he's supporting everybody in the household. So they didn't tell. This came from her going to get prenatal care through the system that got reported to DCF. DCF sees there's a crime, and then it comes into the law enforcement. And then once they do their investigation, it comes to us. Great thing is she's got one child by and she's pregnant with another. Guess what we have in this case? DNA. Love those 3 letters. And they were his babies once the other one was born. Well, she came in for her invest and sat across the desk from me. It was just she and I in there, and she's like, first of all, I'll tell you, I got an email from her to the main office. Now, she sent this email to the head state attorney's email, not to me directly. And her email address, don't tell anybody, it is important what you put out there, especially for us professionally, but anybody. It was Tinkerbitch. So I got an email from Tinkerbitch, which kind of let me know what the invest was going to be like. And she came in and sat there across the desk for me, like many high school kids I taught when I taught English. Feet out, laid back, like, you can't make me say anything. You're right. I'm not gonna hog tie you and tell you to tell me. I love it. I'm not telling you anything that's gonna get him in trouble. Alrighty. Well, you know what? You're here to talk to me today. I have a case with law enforcement's investigation already. And you see all this paperwork on my desk. I got all afternoon, just you and me. Until you're ready to say something, I'll just sit here and do my paperwork and you just hang out there, okay? And she sat there for about 20 minutes and it was, you know, the typical 15-year-old girl. And the eye rolling and held the phone out, looking to see if anybody important's contacting her, like her 36-year-old boyfriend, you know, that kind of stuff, even though there was no contact at this point. So you've got all this stuff going on. It's crazy. So she sat there for a while, and I finally looked up. I said, "Do you want to talk yet?" "I ain't telling you nothing." I said, "Well, you know what? Right now, this is your chance to tell me something about what's going on." And let me tell you, I've got everything else that law enforcement says that he did. So I have their side. And I have to make a decision to file or not file regardless of what you tell me. So if there's something I need to know that you think might even help him or hurt him, whatever, this is your chance. Because if not, I'm not looking good for him. Well, it wasn't looking good anyway, but you know. So she's like, "Fine, I'll tell you what I know." And then she proceeded to basically bury him a little bit more. Now I knew if this went to trial, and it did not, he ended up taking a plea offer. If this went to trial, was I gonna have much luck with her on the stand? No. I mean, this is one of those where I had to start a jury selection with a jury of, you know, okay, think about how people will act. Can you understand if a teenager thinks they're in love with this person, they might not want them in trouble? I've got to start building this attitude up with my jurors already before we go. Once I got her off the stand, if I could just get her to say, "He's the one I had sex with. He's my baby daddy." If I could get him to say that, get her to say that, that's all I needed. The DNA's coming in. It will do the rest of what I need to have happen. So these are some things we deal with. So anyway, when you get your victims in, we do an investigative interview on all of our cases. So on top of our 8 million cases that are going, we get all these investigative cases that are still not filed on. Which again, I love. I think it's very beneficial for us and for the kids. A lot of times, the hard part in those is dealing with the parents. And not, you know, probably again, 85–90% of the time it's a mom. And the first thing that most of them want to tell you, which will tell you how cyclical this stuff is, well, when I was abused as a child, nobody believed me. I know what my child's going through and what they're going to have to deal with. I've been there. That's the good parents. The bad ones are like, "It didn't hurt me, and I had sex with my uncle and my dad. And I'm here to talk about it. She doesn't need counseling." Really? Okay. Hey, you're functioning so well right now. See? And then they turn it around, and all they're doing is talking about themselves in their case. No, you are now a parent with a child that is dealing with this. Deal with your kid the way you should. You know, so a lot of my job too, and you know, lots of training is you almost have to be a mom to the parents. This is why I laugh when people say you're a counselor of law. In my area, we do become counselors a lot for the kids, for the parents, for whoever. So, you know, you do have to deal with that aspect of it. Somebody, a young girl in our office who's doing general felony now wants to come and do these cases. And she came up to me one day and she goes, "Sharon, what can I be doing so that when there's an opening one day, I can come and start doing these cases?" I said, "Take all the victim cases you can take." And mine started without me even getting to do that. We used to have a domestic violence area in our office in misdemeanor that they did all the domestic violence cases. And I spent about a year doing that. Well, if you don't learn how to deal with victims after dealing with a year of domestic violence cases, and you get victims who love him and 24 hours later they don't want to prosecute, you've got the ones that keep showing up and calling, you've got the ones who do want to prosecute. You learn how to handle victims very quickly down there. So I enjoy that part of it. There are days when a certain victim will call, who calls me like every week, 3 times a week. And you're like, "Oh God, can you take a message, please?" But you know what? I got to call them back at some point anyway. So most of the time I'll take it. So I'm not going to tell you that we always go, "Yay, a victim's calling," or their mother's calling, or whoever. But that is probably one of the most important skills you can have in dealing with these cases. Enjoying working with different agencies. There are some attorneys who get very territorial with their cases, and they don't like to share with others. You can't do these kind of cases without sharing with others, because we deal with DCF. We deal with the Child Protection Team, who's through Children's Home Society. And they do forensic interviews of these children, which are videotaped, and they do a phenomenal job. And they also do medical exams on children in a child-friendly environment, so they're not going into the emergency room and having to use adult medical utensils, whatever you want to call them. I don't tell I'm not a medical person. On these kids. You have to deal with law enforcement. I mean, you may deal with other jurisdictions. I've got a new case right now that I'm sure everybody's heard about it because it was in the papers. That is a gentleman who, that's the wrong word, who is a defendant who was committing lewd acts with his grandchildren and videotaping them. In that case, we have Homeland Security involved. We've got the AUSAs, the U.S., the federal jurisdiction is involved in part of it. So there's a lot of this that has crossover for us. We do what we call the live victims, the kids who were abused, come to me. The pornography that's sent like out over state lines and stuff will be handled by the feds. Which brings up in this case another issue that we're kind of debating right now. This guy is probably the poster child to me of back in the day, years ago, when capital sexual battery charges, you could be killed for those, just like you can first-degree murders. If this guy is not the poster child for that, sexually abusing a 6-month-old and a year-old, I don't know who is. And then being on tape bragging about it. You know, I mean, that's probably the worst case I've ever seen. And I will tell you what a weenie I am. Unlike law enforcement, I am not looking at those videos. I don't like looking at those videos until the day this gets ready to go to trial. Because to my knowledge, nobody has invented the Men in Black pen that wipes it out of your mind yet. And the guys and the women and the prosecutors who deal with this all the time, this is what we're concerned with this case. Putting that in front of a jury. You have, you know, unlike people that deal with this stuff all the time, I may not look at these tapes all the time, but I do enough of it that I'm going to look at it and be like, oh my God. And it's probably going to scar me a little more than I probably already am. And I'm probably going to be a little weirder than I already am. But at least I know what to expect. You put, like we talked about, you know, church granny in there who doesn't even think this stuff happens, and she has to see this on tape. How is that going to affect these jurors? Now, federally, they have vehicles there established in funding where jurors federally who have to go through this, if they need counseling, they can ask for it through the government. I don't know of that statewide. We even had the assistant U.S. attorney that I'm dealing with on this case out of Tampa. She does all of the pornography cases, and she actually had a judge one time after one of the porn cases go, who do I call about that? Because I need to get some counseling after this. This is not what your normal average people sees, and we see a lot of violence on TV, and people get very immune to the effects of it. You don't see this on TV. I mean, you just don't. So that's a concern with this case. It's a great case. He confessed. We've got, obviously, video of it. And the poor detective who's been handling it, he came up and he goes, do you have to play this tape to a jury? I said, how else do I get my accent of what he did to these kids? I mean, they're not going to be able to testify to it. So yeah, if it goes to a trial, it's going to be in front of the jury to see it. So anyway, we get them in, we do an invest, we make decisions, looking at the statutes that we deal with, whether or not we have enough evidence to go forward, file charges, and go from there. I tell parents the court process is not friendly to anybody, let alone children. On average, and I say on average, these cases take approximately a year to go through the system. Do not expect it to be over by, spring break, which is in a month, or wasn't it? That's not going to happen. And the kids don't want to keep coming back. And so, we try and limit their exposure, but the parents stay in touch with us, let us know what's going on, or DCF if the kids are in their care. Once we get going through the system, obviously you can see there's going to be an exchange of what we call discovery, which is all the reports. Florida has a very liberal discovery rule. There are other jurisdictions where they go in and they don't know what the other side has at trial. In Florida, it's all out there. You have to disclose it. So the other side knows where you're coming from. We do depositions. We do probably some different hearings than they do in other cases. We do what we call a child hearsay hearing, which is any child, and this just changed in January, which for our benefit, which is great. It used to be any child under the age of 12 who made a statement about what happened, whether it was to law enforcement, the child protection team, a parent, a friend. What they said happened, you could have a hearing, the judge could decide if it was reliable and trustworthy and how it came out. And that person can come in and say, yeah, Janie told me that he did this to her. Because usually that's not coming in, only what the defendant says. Now, this new legislation upped that to any child 16 and under. So it's great. And now the only problem with that is child protection team, who is also very understaffed, they used to not do kids that were like 15 and 16-year-olds, their interviews. They would let law enforcement handle that, and often law enforcement gets trained in forensic interviewing. So now they're having to do it because they're the only ones that videotape these. And then we do the child hearsay. We can play that video of the child in the courtroom. And the great thing with that is, if this case takes a year and a half to go through the system, how many of you remember exactly what you were doing at Christmas a year and a half ago? One? Good for you.
Honestly, I did.
Good. Well, you're one of the few. I mean, I know I had Christmas. I know it happened. I know I probably had family around. I probably don't even remember who everybody was there. I know my kids because they come to get their gifts. But I couldn't tell you every person. I don't remember if my sister and her family were there. I know sometimes they come, sometimes they don't. We're asking these kids who are not even adults to come back and say a year and a half later, do you remember exactly what day he molested you? Well, no, I remember it was over the summer and I think I was 6. But you know what? These interviews that are videotaped, they do them right after it's disclosed. Now, sometimes if you have late disclosure, it's not as helpful. So all I have to do is say, but you remember you were, approximately how old? I can play that tape and it shows better what their memories were then. So it is a huge benefit to have these videotapes able to come in court. Speaking of doing that, one of the other challenges with kids is times, distances, dates. How many of you, as a 12-year-old, kept a calendar of every event that happened in your life? I barely keep one now, so my secretary does it for me. So you think back, and one of the questions, and this is my way I came up with, every attorney has their own little different things, the Christmas thing. I will ask my potential jurors when I have a young child who's not real sure on dates and times. How many of you remember that there was Christmas last year? How many of you? Y'all remember Christmas? How many of you can tell me every gift you got and who gave it to you? 1, 2, 3, 4, a couple of you, 5. Okay. What's wrong with the rest of you people? You can't remember? Guess what? I can't remember usually what I had to eat a week ago for dinner. But we want these kids, and this is what the defense hammers on. So you were molested by so-and-so, but you can't tell me what day it happened? Can't even, and then they go to close it. Johnny couldn't even remember what day this happened. You're going to believe him? Johnny's 6. Are you kidding me? Okay, so these are reasons that I ask these, when people it gets them laughing, first of all, gets them a little warmed up. But it also makes them stop and think, yeah, I remember, but I don't remember everything. And, I'm an adult, so how is this kid going to remember this? So then we get into the court process, which takes, like I said, forever, pretrial statuses, all kinds of different hearings. The other hearing we do a lot is called Williams Rule. And if you do law enforcement work, this is so important for us if you guys find this out. If anybody that is involved in your case knows of any other potential family members, friends, whatever, that have alleged that this person did the same thing to them, You may not want to investigate it because it was too long ago. It may be out of your jurisdiction. But please put the names and contact numbers that you can get for that person. Because Williams' rule is similar evidence. And what that means is in a case like this, if I can prove that, and I've had several cases where a defendant sexually abuses a grandchild. Guess what? Defendant also sexually abused a sister and a daughter. And it comes out. Now, you know, maybe the sister was so long ago that they can't remember where it was or statute of limitations is run. But I can still use that. If it's similar enough in nature, I have to go, like this child hearsay, I have to go in front of a judge, do a hearing. And if the judge finds it similar enough in nature, that's coming in. That's powerful evidence to help with a child testifying that this happened to somebody else before too. This is not the first time this guy's done this. So make sure you ask about stuff like that, because on down the road, that is so important for us in these kind of cases. Once we go to trial, obviously, you know, there's a lot of stuff that goes into prepping for it. There's a lot of pretrial motions we do. We go in, we usually, I'm a firm believer in most, I would say every case, but I hate all and nothing. In probably 99% of my cases, I make plea offers. I don't give it away, but I think we walk a fine line in these cases of putting a child through a trial. I also, as I tell the parents, I don't represent your child. I'm not your child's attorney. I represent the state of Florida, which means that not only do I have to take care of the incident that occurred with your child, but I have to ensure that this guy doesn't get back out and do this to another child. So we do, the good thing in our division is that the penalties in these cases, the legislature has made them so high, especially kids under 12. If you touch a child under 12 in a sexual way, just touching them. We had one case where a guy came in a house, broke in, saw a little kid, walked up and rubbed her butt on the outside of her clothes before he decided to leave after he took some stuff. Do you know what the minimum that person can get is? 25 years in prison. Yeah. If you have sex with a child under 12 in any shape, way, whether you know it's traditional, oral, whatever, digital, sorry, not to be too graphic, but that person it's automatic life in prison. They get no parole, no nothing, which is why we get a lot of pleas to that. I mean, we can go in and say, you know, you're 45. You can take 30 years and maybe get out. You know, followed by lifetime probation and being a sex offender or predator or that kind of stuff and registering. A lot of people will do that because they know the alternative is, if it's a good case for us, that they're going to be going away for the rest of their lives and there's no way they're coming out except being first. So when you get a little bit older, the penalties over 12 are not so bad, but it still does a lot. Once we go to trial, we get them convicted. If they're convicted of a sex case of children under 16 or under 18, depending on the charge, you're looking at being a sex offender or a sexual predator for the rest of your life and having to register. Offenders register 2 times a year, predators 4 times a year. And that's a forever thing. So that's kind of what we go towards. Any post-conviction work, we have a division in our office that does that. I don't handle it, and that's what I do every day. I'm in 6 courtrooms. If you need me, you're welcome to email me. That's probably the best way. But I keep saying I need those kids' shoes that have you can turn the wheels on them underneath, so I can just slide into the next courtroom. But if anybody has questions, if we have time, I'll be happy to try and answer them. There's some different registration requirements, but the biggest one is that if you are an offender, you register twice a year. A predator is 4 times a year. They have to check in with law enforcement and make sure they're at the same place. Predators are anybody who is convicted of a first-degree or capital offense or life offense, or somebody who's had a prior sex offense and they've gotten convicted of a second one. And offenders are any F2s or below or first times.
2 questions.
Yes, sir.
When you bring in a witness who the victim has told something, has that been challenged up in the Florida Supreme Court or on the way to the Supreme Court on the hearsay rule?
For child hearsay?
Yeah.
It's pretty well entrenched in Florida and federally. There's a Child hearsay it's been entrenched for so long that this going up to 16 is the first change in years that I'm aware of. So it is one exception to the hearsay rule that nobody really fights too much. What the defense attorneys more fight is whether it's reliable, is it trustworthy, and all the different criteria that a judge has to look at in order to let it in.
Second question, where you assist law enforcement through those intakes, have you ever been bumped from a trial because you're a witness?
I have not, and I tell you what we do. We have investigators in our office, and often when we interview a child, other than like the one I told you about that I was in there alone, that's work product for us, because unless we get something new, a new offense out of it that we then need to relay to the defense why we're, as a report, it's work product. It's me talking with my victim just to see what's going on, so I don't have to disclose it. We most of the time have an investigator in there with us for that purpose. So if there are new charges that come out, guess who's going to write the report and be the person to testify? Ain't going to be me. Anybody else? It really isn't. There is case law out there that says that they have to use child-friendly language. Then that's my pet peeve. I had one attorney one time asking a 6-year-old kid, so subsequent to doing this, really subsequent? Are you kidding me? And the kid's like, I don't know. And then they want to come back in closing and say, they couldn't even answer my questions, but they could answer the state attorney's. Well, yeah, because I'm talking to them like they're a 6-year-old. I could object to that, approach the judge, and the judge could instruct them to use child-friendly language. There are rare cases where if a child has had so much psychological damage that we have several hoops we need to go through with the judge in a hearing where we can have them testify in camera, they call it, from a different room, not in front of the defendant. And I have, in 8 to 9 years of doing this, I've never had that happen. Like I said, most of these kids are good. It's their parents who are freaking out. If the parents have to testify, you want to put them in camera, you know what I mean? Because they're dying. Don't look at, I a lot of times have them as a witness whether I call them or not, because I don't want them sitting in there going, oh my God, Susie, you can do it. This kid's doing fine without you. I mean, to me, the best thing is when it's like a dad or a family member or a friend. And these little kids, I had one little girl, it was her dad who molested her. She comes in, cute as a button, 6 years old, little pigtails, her little Sunday dress. She walks by the defense table, up, she goes, hi Dad, how are you? And proceeds to walk up and then tells what he was doing. And you don't think a jury eats that up? I'm like, oh, score one for me, yes. You know? So these kids still love them, regardless, it's Dad. Anybody else? Yes, ma'am.
How can we email?
My email is sfranklin@sao10.com. And that stands for State Attorney's Office, 10th Circuit.
Yeah, I had a question.
Yes,
So do
sir.
y'all like follow up with these victims?
Um,
Have programs for them or anything like that?
We can refer them to people. United Way is generally where we start because they have a multitude of different things. If it's a sex abuse case, sometimes the rape crisis. A lot of people that we get don't have insurance, which I guess now will change. I don't know. And stuff, so Peace River has a sliding scale that they work with people on. The Sweet Center in Winter Haven has a really good program as well. We have a victim advocate in our office and they kind of handle that. But yes, we can help them find, there's also through the state of Florida, a victim's compensation, and if like they need to move to get away from somebody, there's a one-time you can do that, but you have to continue to assist prosecution. So there are some things out there for people. Anybody else? Victim advocates are huge too, if anybody's ever interested in that end of it. Thank you guys very much. I'm sorry I was late.
Thank you, everybody. If you'll come back at 11:15, our next speaker will be here.
Sorry, James. I don't think we could clone something interesting.
I think so. Just